Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, The Package Tourist, the magical mystery tour called life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is baseball author Eric Vickrey. Eric resides in Washington State, and he has worked as a physician's assistant since 2006. But in his spare time, he has published 2 books on baseball and will release a third one this coming December or January. In 2023, his first book, Runnin Redbirds, the world champion 1982 St. Louis Cardinals, was released. And last year, his second book, Season of Shattered Dreams, Postwar Baseball, the Spokane Indians, and a tragic bus crash that changed everything, was released. Tonight we will pay tribute to Eric's baseball writing career. Eric, what led you to write about baseball?
Well, I really got started writing about baseball in 2020, during the early days of the pandemic. I've always been a big baseball fan, and I enjoy writing. That's kind of my creative outlet. And in the early days of the pandemic, I was looking for some way to pass the time. Right around then, my father-in-law actually passed away, so my wife was living with her mom back in St. Louis, and I was out here in Washington State by myself with a lot of time on my hands. So I started writing, contributing articles to the Society for American Baseball Research. And they have a project where they're producing biographies for every major league player who has ever played. So I signed up to write a few biographies, enjoyed the process, and that kind of spurred me on to take on bigger projects.
Okay. Eric, how long did it take for you to write Runnin Redbirds?
I think it took me about a year from start to finish. That book was very much a learning process for me, as that was my first book. I'd written several of these sort of 3,000 to 4,000 word biographies for Sabre, but I had certainly never tackled anything like a book project. So I learned a lot along the way, and had some stops and starts, and had to sort of rewrite and kind of just learn the process along the way. And then finding a publisher was a whole other process. So that side of it was also a learning experience.
Eric, who were you able to interview for the book Runnin Redbirds?
Well, for that book, I interviewed about 10 former major league players, 3 of whom played for the 1982 Cardinals. I interviewed Dane Orge, who was one of the World Series heroes, Jeff Keener, who was a relief pitcher, and Mike Ramsey, who was one of their infielders. As that was my first project, I really had no contacts in baseball, and certainly no name recognition, and I didn't even have a website at that time. So tracking down players and getting them to talk to me was certainly a challenge for that first book.
Let's talk about the team. How did the 1982 Cardinals play baseball? Can you describe their tactical approach?
Yeah, so that was a very exciting era of what Cardinals fans call Whitey Ball. Whitey Herzog was, of course, the manager and also the general manager of the team. And when he took over, he kind of reconstructed the team to fit the stadium. Busch Stadium at that time had AstroTurf. It was a really big ballpark with big dimensions. So he got a lot of speedsters who could take advantage of the dimensions and who could take advantage of the artificial turf. So he kind of reshaped the team. They were great at speed and defense. They stole about 200 bases that year, had very little power. They only hit 67 home runs that entire season, and they had pretty solid pitching. So it was a very exciting brand of baseball in '82 and throughout the '80s. That's kind of the style of baseball I grew up watching.
What made Whitey Herzog the great manager that he was?
Well, a couple of things. He was just a true baseball savant. Just could always have a good idea, a few innings ahead of what was happening in the game. Could really think ahead. He was also an excellent communicator. That's something I heard from several of his players who I interviewed. They almost to a man said that Herzog would take them aside, these guys on the bench, and let them know, hey, you're going to be playing in a few days. Need you to be ready. Just an excellent communicator, and then just his baseball genius was off the charts.
Okay, Eric, who were the key players for the 1982 Cardinals?
Well, they had a really solid team from top to bottom without really any superstars. They, of course, had Ozzie Smith, who was a future Hall of Famer, and Bruce Sutter was their Hall of Fame closer. But they certainly didn't have any big power hitters. They didn't have any aces like Steve Carlton or Nolan Ryan, anyone like that. They had a bunch of just really solid players, starting at the top of the lineup with Lonnie Smith, who led the team in stolen bases. That was Willie McGee's rookie season, came on as a center fielder. They had Keith Hernandez at first base, a Gold Glove, former MVP winner, Tom Herr at second base, Ken Oberkfell at third, Darrell Porter at catcher. So there's a bunch of sort of solid major leaguers, not necessarily MVP candidates or even all-stars, but just a solid team, and then a pretty good starting rotation with guys like Bob Forsch and Joaquin Andahar, and of course Sutter at the back end of the bullpen.
In your opinion, who was the unsung hero of the 1982 Cardinals, if you could isolate someone?
I'd have to say Lonnie Smith. He led the team in WAR, or wins above replacement, and had a really career year. He had over 300, stole, I think, like 68 bases that year, had some power, high on-base percentage. He sort of set the table getting on base for guys like Keith Hernandez and George Hendrick to drive him in. So I would have to go with Lonnie Smith as my unsung hero from that team.
Okay, Eric, let's talk about your second book now. What led you to write Season of Shattered Dreams?
Yeah, so I really learned about this story as I was sort of writing these biographies for the Society for American Baseball Research back in 2020. I kind of stumbled across the story of the 1946 Spokane Indians. They were a minor league team who was involved in a really tragic bus accident in the Cascade Mountains, just about an hour east of Seattle. And it was a accident that ended up killing 9 players and was truly a horrific incident. I had never heard of the story until I sort of stumbled across it looking through the newspaper archives, and I just kind of got intrigued. And the more I dug into the story, I realized there were a lot of layers to it, and I felt that it really had never been told, certainly not in book form. So I kind of set out to learn as much as I can and track down as many people who I could, family members and so forth, and gathered as much information that became the book.
Eric, and what farm chain did the Spokane Indians belong to?
Well, they were an independent team. They played in a Class B league called the Western International League, which consisted of 8 teams from Oregon, Washington State, and British Columbia. And at that time, not all minor league teams were affiliated with major league teams, but they did have these sort of working agreements, informal agreements in place with a few teams, the New York Yankees, Oakland Oaks, and San Diego Padres at the Pacific Coast League. And that's kind of where they got their players. They had these agreements that each of those teams would send them a few players, and then the Spokane Indians also signed a few players of their own.
Okay, what caused the bus crash? What happened?
So the team was driving across Washington State. They had their next series was in Bremerton, Washington, just across the Puget Sound from Seattle. The team rode in a pre-war 25-passenger bus. There were 16 players on board when it left Spokane. They stopped for dinner in Ellensburg in the central part of the state. And at that time, one of the players, Jack Lorkey, was called off the bus because he received a message that he was going up to the Pacific Coast League. So the rest of the team carried on, and it was about an hour later that the bus was going over Snoqualmie Pass. An oncoming vehicle caused the bus to swerve. The bus driver lost control, and it broke through the guardrail and went down a steep 300-foot ravine.
Ouch.
So this is a really horrific accident that killed 9 players.
How did the team? I don't know if you could say the word recover, but how did they proceed after the bus crash? I mean, were they able to complete the season? I mean, almost literally half the team was wiped out. I mean, what happened for the remainder of the season?
Yeah, so the 15 players who were on the bus, 9 of them were killed. 6 did survive, but all of those players had fairly severe injuries, so none of them were able to continue playing. There were actually 2 players who drove separately, so those were really the only 2 able-bodied players that they had after the accident. Remarkably, the team actually sort of reassembled. They found players, either semi-pro players or players who had been cut loose by other organizations, and they actually resumed playing a week later, which I found pretty remarkable. So it's just this accident occurred on June 24th, 1946. The team started playing just after July 1st of that year, and they were very unsuccessful. They were something like 30 games under 500 the rest of the season, playing with this sort of hodgepodge of players that they rounded up.
Now, Eric, this book covers 3 players: Vic Pichetti, I hope I'm saying his name right, Ben Garrity, and Jack Lorky. Why did you focus on those 3 men?
Yeah, so I really researched the whole team, and my goal was really to tell the story of the whole team and everyone involved, but I soon found out that really these 3 men stood out to me for a few different reasons. One is that in Pichetti's case, he was the best prospect on the team. He was only 18 years old, and he was from San Francisco, and there was a ton I found out just from newspaper archives about him during his high school career. And also I was able to track down a member of Vic's family who had old scrapbooks that contained photos and letters. So I had a wealth of information about him. So I knew he would be a focus of the book. And in the case of Ben Garrity, he was a former Major League player who had joined the team just a couple weeks before the accident. He survived and ultimately went on to become a very successful minor league manager, actually managed Hank Aaron during Aaron's minor league career. And then Jack Lorky, he was the gentleman who was pulled off the bus in Ellensburg just by incredible happenstance, and actually went on to play 7 seasons in the major leagues for the Giants and Phillies. And he had a truly remarkable story. So those 3 really stood out to me as kind of being just kind of representing the different stories of the players involved. You had Pichetti, who was killed in the accident, Ben Garrity, who survived, and then Jack Lorky, who just was actually pulled off the bus. So in a way, they sort of represented the 3 outcomes that the players in the team had.
Eric, tell me if I'm right in this. Because Lorky didn't get on that ill-fated, was out called off that bus before the accident, isn't it true that's where he got his famous nickname, Lucky? Yes, that's exactly right. It was shortly after the accident that people started referring to him as Lucky. It was referred to that in newspapers, and actually this bus accident was not his first brush with death. He actually served in the Battle of Bulge during World War II, survived that, and then remarkably, after returning home from the war, sailed back to New York, and then was going to fly home to California, and was actually pulled off an airplane that ended up crashing near Kansas City. So Jack's story was truly remarkable. He had all these brushes with death, so it was a very appropriate nickname, Lucky Lorky, but certainly one he was never comfortable with. He did not like that nickname. Getting to Ben Garrity, because I remember as a kid, when Hank Aaron was chasing Babe Ruth's record, there were all these little pocket bios on him. They mentioned Ben Garrity, because by the time Aaron was chasing Ruth, Ben Garrity was dead. What was it that made him... Why did you examine why Hank Aaron really loved him as a manager? Did you get into that at all? Yeah, actually, in Hank Aaron's autobiography, there's a whole page about how he really admired Ben Garrity, how Ben helped him. This was in 1953 is when Hank Aaron played for Ben Garrity with the Jacksonville Braves.
as a single-A player. And that was also the same year that Aaron and a couple of his teammates integrated the South Atlantic League. So it was kind of a very difficult circumstance that year for Aaron, and he really admired how Ben Garrity helped him during that season, not only navigate the difficulty of integrating the league, but also just his baseball knowledge. Aaron said he was the smartest baseball man he ever met, and he always said that he regretted that that Garrity was not able to manage in the major leagues.
What year did Ben Garrity die? Because I know he was dead by the time Aaron was chasing Ruth's record in 73 and 74. What year did he die?
Yeah, he died in 1961, I believe. It was in the early 60s, and he was only in his early 50s at that time. But one of the tragic things that came out of surviving this bus accident was that Ben Garrity coped with this by drinking heavily. He actually another Pat Jordan, who well-known Sports Illustrated writer, actually played minor league baseball in the Braves system and under Ben Garrity, and also talked in his book about how Garrity would sort of drink to cope with the stress of having to ride buses in the minor leagues after this accident. So that's ultimately what caused his death at an early age.
Okay, Eric, let's talk about your upcoming book, which should be coming out either this December or January. Is that correct? What will it discuss?
Yeah, so I've sort of, while I was writing this story about the Spokane Indians, the 1946 team, I did a lot of research just about Spokane Indians baseball and kind of learn the history of the franchise. And I found that the 1970 team was really one of the best minor league teams that's ever been assembled. And they were an affiliate of the Los Angeles Dodgers at that time. And a lot of those players came out of the Dodgers' famous 1968 draft. So the book is about the sort of baseball's transition from the, sort of the bonus baby era to the amateur draft, and then the Dodgers' 1968 draft class, which went on to play in Spokane in 70.
Okay. Who were some of these players selected by Los Angeles in the 68 amateur draft? Any names that who were the big names?
Yeah, so a lot of household names. They drafted in January that year Davey Lopes.
Wow.
And then in June they had a huge haul of players. They took Valentine in the first round, Bobby Valentine, who was their most highly regarded prospect of that class, believe it or not, and ultimately injuries kind of kept him from reaching his full potential. But then they drafted Bill Buckner, Steve Garvey, Tom Paciorek, Doyle Alexander, Jeff Zahn, Ron Say. So there were, I think, 11 major leaguers came out of that draft, and they combined for more than 11,000 hits, more than 1,000 home runs, and more than 300 wins from the pitchers from that draft. So definitely the best draft class in baseball history by any measure.
Who was the Dodgers general manager who made those selections?
Well, what's interesting about the 68 draft is Buzzy DiBiase had been the Dodgers general manager, and just a few days before the draft, he jumped ship to take a new job with the San Diego Padres, the expansion Padres, as their team president, and actually had a share in ownership. So Fresco Thompson, who was the Dodgers minor league director, took over the GM role, and Al Campanis was the scouting director. So it was really Fresco Thompson and Al Campanis who kind of oversaw the 68 draft.
Okay, who were the scouts who helped the team make those choices?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that compelled me to write the book. I feel like the scouts, contributed heavily to the success of the Dodgers draft in '68, and they've kind of it's a lot of names that most baseball fans, even diehards, probably haven't heard of. Guys like Leon Hamilton. He was a Florida-based scout who signed guys like Charlie Huff and Don Sutton. Bill Brenzel was a California-based scout who signed Ron Say and Bill Buckner. Guy Wellman was a Michigan-based scout that signed Steve Garvey. So all these guys found these sort of diamonds in the rough and then submitted their reports to Al Campanis and Fresco Thompson, who ended up taking this great haul of players that year.
Okay, Eric, let's talk about yourself now. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born and raised in Alden, Illinois, which is about 20 miles from St. Louis, and that's how I became a Cardinals fan growing up in the 80s. I still maintain an allegiance to the Cardinals, even though I live out here in Washington State now, but I've also adopted the Mariners as sort of my second team.
Okay, where'd you go to college?
I went to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. I got my undergraduate degree there, and then I got a master's degree at Midwestern University, which is a medical school in the Chicago suburbs, and got my master's as a physician assistant in 2003.
Eric, whenever I interview an author on my show, I always love to ask this standard question. When you were growing up, who were your favorite authors? And of those favorite authors, did any of them light the spark inside you to become a writer or perhaps influence your writing style?
Yeah, definitely. Growing up, I don't think that I read a lot for leisure. Growing up, I do remember that I read Ball 4 during high school. Of course, the famous book by Jim Bouton, that was a favorite of mine. Boys of Summer by Roger Kahn, that has always been a favorite book of mine. So those of all the baseball books I've read are probably at the top of my list. And then sort of non-baseball authors who I enjoyed, Dave Eggers. He writes both fiction and nonfiction. And then Daniel James Brown. He's the author of The Boys in the Boat, among other books. Just a great narrative nonfiction writer. So I really enjoy just reading his sort of descriptive style, how much detail he puts into his books. Another one I should mention, Jeff Pearlman, who writes a lot of sports books.
Yeah.
He really inspired me kind of more in recent years, just reading how much detail Jeff interviews hundreds of people for his books. So with my second book and now this forthcoming book, I interviewed dozens of people, and it really, I think, helped bring out details that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Eric, once their third book is released, either in December or January, do you have any idea what your next book project will be for your fourth book, and when do you think we might see its release?
Yeah, I have an idea in mind. I really, the last few years, I've kind of gone from one project to another without taking much of a break, and this is, in addition to maintaining a full-time job as a physician assistant. So I've kind of been burning the candle at both ends for a few years now, and I've kind of vowed that after this book on the 68 Dodgers draft comes out this winter, I'm going to take the next year off, although I do have another project in mind that I plan to start probably in the fall of 26. So these books usually take me close to a year, so I would say maybe late 27, early 28 will be my next book. And I've sort of pinpointed a baseball player who's, I think, kind of gone under the radar. There's not a biography about him. I won't mention it, just sort of keep that to myself for now, but it's a player from sort of the bygone era. He played in the 40s and 50s, who I think deserves a biography, so I'm going to try to tackle that.
Eric, when it's ready to be released, reach out to me. I want you on my show again so we can talk about it, okay?
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Eric, you take care, okay? And good luck in all your writing endeavors.
All right, thanks, Matthew. I enjoyed the conversation.
You take care. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for next week's show where I will be interviewing author Aaron Bartlemy. Thank you and good night.